Welcome dear students to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K.S. Nagaraja of Deccan College, Pune. I am teaching the course of Historical Linguistics. In this module, we are going to discuss laws of analogy. In fact, in the previous module, we studied the various types of analogical changes available in the language. And also I hinted at some of the attempts to provide a regularization or regular statements for the various types of analogy. So basically, two scholars have attempted to provide regularities for analogy. One is by Kurłyowicz. He uses the term laws, Kurłyowicz laws of analogy. And the other is Mankeker, he uses the term tendencies of analogy. So in this particular module, we look at the laws and the tendencies and see how far they are successful in providing generalizations to analogical changes. There are various attempts to provide the direction that analogy might take. And perhaps the most successful of these is that of Kurłyowicz, and the other was by Manzak. Incidentally, both are Polish scholars. Though they belong to same nationality, the two scholars are far apart in their approach to the problem. Kurłyowicz's work is essentially introspective, according to one of the famous historical linguists, Hawk, based on the feeling for the direction of analogical changes, which he had acquired over many years as a practicing historical and comparative linguist. The major emphasis of his work is on morphology, and his resulting generalizations are stated as laws. Manzrak, on the other hand, based his observations on a statistical investigation of the analogical changes postulated in standard handbooks on the historical grammar of various European languages. His emphasis tends to be more on the phonological nature of words and morphemes, including their length, and his generalizations are stated as tendencies. He proposed 9 hypotheses concerning natural direction or tendency of analogical change. These hypotheses were formulated in response to Kurlyowicz laws of analogy and thus logically presuppose them. As this formulation is not that popular as the first one, it will not be discussed in this class. Kurlyowicz first formulated his idea in an article entitled "The Nature of the So-called Analogical Processes." In that article, he presented 6 laws of analogy regarding their actual performance, and even as regards possibility of formulating such laws, still controversy exists. There seems to be examples which go against these laws. Still, his laws are valuable and should be known because they represent a serious attempt to put some order and restraint on analogical processes. Also, some rewordings have been proposed to some of the laws for easy understanding. The 6 laws are the following. Law 1. A bipartite morpheme tends to replace a unitary one. That means a twofold morphological marker tends to replace one that is single. In other words, a complex marking replaces a simple marking. A standard example of this is provided by German. Old High German, the ancestor of modern German, has a variety of patterns for constructing plurals. One of these was exhibited by nouns like Gast, that means guest, plural gesti, in which the stem vowel undergoes the change called umlaut under the influence of the vowel in the plural suffix. This noun comes into modern German as Gast, Gasse, with a double marking, that is umlaut plus suffix. The Old High German noun Baum, tree, had a plural Boma with no umlaut, and this should have come into the modern language as Baum, the reconstructed form Baume. Instead, German has Baum, Baume with umlaut. The double plural marking has been extended from cases in which it is historically normal, like Gust, to others in which it is not regular. This can be presented in the following way. So, from the examples of above type, the first law can be derived. A bipartite morpheme tends to replace a unitary one. That is, a language prefers to add a second corroborating marker of meaning or function wherever it is possible. That is, a language tends to have redundancy. This also involves the principle of polarity, which states that two linguistic forms of the same root which have different meanings or functions will tend to polarize or become maximally distinct. In the example under question, the singular and plural of top have become more distinct than they previously were. Now, law number 2, analogy proceeds from a base to a derived form, is revised as the two terms which make up the first part of a proportion must be related by a productive morphological process. In other words, a derived form is reshaped to make it more transparent and especially more similar to the simple forms from which it is derived. Analogy proceeds from the base to the derived form. That is, the first term of the proportion must be a base and the second must be derived from it. For example, stone, stones, as word x. Ring, rang, bring, brang. An immediate difficulty with the second law is seen in the case of back formation. Singer, sing, orator, x, it becomes orate. Unfortunately, his second law would not allow such a proportion, since sing is clearly the basic form from which singer is derived. The second law is designed to place a restriction on the items which can serve as a model for new analogical formations. So, we see his original formulation is too restrictive and that it must be revised to include back formations. In order to preserve the important point of the law and yet allow for back formation, law 2 might be revised to read as follows: the two terms which make up the first part of a proportion must be related by a productive morphological process. For instance, present tense in English, present tense was the past tense: speak, spoke, seek, sought, reek, reeked. If a child or a second language learner says, I speaked or I seeked, we can understand. But if he says I sought or I wrought, on the pattern of speak, we would scarcely understand these as the past tenses of given verbs. By accepting the revised version of the second law, we can rule out the possibility of such formations. So now we move on to law number 3. A form transparently consisting of a stem plus an affix serves as a model for reshaping related forms in which the stem affix structure is opaque. That means any construction consisting of a constant plus a variable is used as pattern for an isolated entity of the same function. Constructions like wrongly from wrong were used as pattern for remodeling adverbs such as slow, slowly. Here is an example from Basque language. The Basque question word non consists of the interrogative stem no plus the ordinary locative case ending no. By reanalysis, this word has acquired a corresponding indefinite non-byte, nun-byte, that means somewhere. But this form is now unusual among locative forms in that it doesn't end in the normal no. In some Western varieties of Basque, therefore, nun-byte has been replaced by an innovating form nun-byten, in which the locative case ending has been attached to the end of the word on the model of the other locative forms. Another instance, one given by Kurłyowicz himself, can be presented here. Old French and New French, between New French, Old French, second singular, leves, plural, levons, that means lift, plural, first person plural, levis. Then New French, leves and levons. Here the root of plural first person levons seems to be the basic number and the suffix ones the subordinate member. The expected outcome, lève, Old French singular, second person, leves, appears to be the basic isolated member in that it lacks an overt subordinate ending, but isofunctional by being marked for person, just like the first plural. And as the example shows, in modern French, the expected lève has been remade to leves, lève, on the model of the vocalism of first person plural levons. So we move on to the next law, law number 4. When a new analogical formulation is accepted in the language, it takes on the primary function of the word. That is, when a form undergoes analogical reshaping, the new form takes over its primary function and the old form remains only in secondary functions. A simple example of this is English brother. This used to have a plural brethren, itself an example of the third law, since n is a second plural used to support the vowel change in a as plural marker. But a new regular plural brothers has been constructed by analogy and now serves as the ordinary plural, while the older brethren is now confined to special contexts, especially religious ones. Nobody now says, I have two brethren. It is, I have two brothers. Another example from English is housewife. The older hussy pronunciation has lost its central meaning and become confined to a pejorative sense. This law deals with the results of the operation of analogy. This law states that when a new analogical formation is accepted in the language, it takes on the primary function of the word. If the older irregular form remains in use, it is restricted to secondary functions. Besides the above illustration, one can cite another example as follows: old, elder, older, bold, bolder. Already we have seen earlier. The analogical formation of old, older on the pattern of bold, bolder may seem to be violation of the first law, and indeed it is, since the unitary morpheme suffix er has replaced the bipartite morpheme vowel change o to a plus suffix er. This should not be too surprising if we bear in mind the restrictions imposed by the second law, that only productive processes are involved in analogical formation. The point is, by the time of the creation of the form older, the vowel change, that is the umlaut, was no longer a productive process for comparatives in English. Therefore, the forms without umlaut had to serve as the model for the analogical change. Now, law number 5. In order to re-establish a central grammatical distinction, the language will give up a distinction of more marginal significance. This law is intended to explain why certain analogical operations take place and is stated as follows. In order to establish a central grammatical distinction, a language will abandon one that is more marginal. In some cases, they are clear, as in the development of the Latin nouns of the third declension into Spanish. Given the Latin forms for the word key in the left column, the forms on the right column are what would be expected in Spanish, considering only the operation of the sound laws by which Spanish developed. So, if you look at the forms Latin and the expected Spanish, singular nominative form Latin claves, expected Spanish laves, accusative form clavem, expected Spanish lave, nominative plural claves, expected Spanish laves, accusative plural claves, expected Spanish is laves. As can be seen, the nominative and accusative of the plural have merged, while the singular and plural of the accusative have been kept distinct. But more important than that is that the nominative singular has become identical with both plural forms, and thus the distinction between singular and plural has been erased. So the two grammatical distinctions with which we are concerned here are singular versus plural and nominative versus accusative. Which distinction is more important to the language? That is the basic question. Given the state of the development of Spanish and of course the other Romance languages, it is not at all difficult to see that the singular plural distinction is central, while the nominative accusative distinction is peripheral or marginal. It is marginal because word order was replacing case endings as the indicator of grammatical relationships. According to this law, what we would expect is that Spanish would give up the case distinction in order to preserve number distinction, and this is precisely what we find has happened. The expected Spanish form given above for the nominative singular does not occur. Instead, we have the form lave, which is identical with the accusative singular. The proportion which provides the mechanism for this change could be stated as follows: accusative plural versus nominative plural as accusative singular versus nominative singular. So laves is to laves, so lave becomes lave. Interestingly enough, this is the example given by Kurłyowicz himself, yet it seems to violate his own second law in that the direction of change moves from the accusative to the nominative singular. In no grammatical theory is an accusative considered as a base from which a nominative is derived. In fact, the reverse is generally the case. Next law, the last law, number 6. A native form may be analogically reshaped under the influence of a non-native form, especially if the non-native variety is more prestigious. In other words, the first and second term of a proportion can belong to originally different systems. One belongs to a prestige dialect, the other to a dialect imitating it. For example, Basque has a highly productive suffix tasun for deriving abstract nouns, bakar tasun, solitude, bakar, alone, eder tasun, beauty, eder, beautiful. But the language has borrowed a number of abstract nouns from the neighboring and more prestigious Spanish with the Spanish suffixes dad and dura. As a result, these suffixes have, for some speakers, in some cases, replaced the native tasun, and many Basques say bakar dude for solitude and eder dura for beauty. We can see, therefore, that the processes involved in analogical leveling are by no means chaotic. Instead, they generally proceed along logical lines that demonstrate similarities between both within and between languages. It is also striking that many of these processes appear to work hand in hand. It would be possible to apply 2 or 3 of the laws to the changes described in just one example. To summarize then, this module has tried to show that analogical changes are also have some sort of regularity, some direction involved, and not haphazard. These 2 scholars have tried to indicate the way the changes are likely to take place. So even the understanding of these laws or tendencies help us to appreciate the efforts of scholars working on these lines, because analogy itself is non-productive, irregular. However, to identify some amount of regularity there is a further task, and so only some scholars achieve that. It is important to appreciate their effort and look for this kind of regularities in our own languages when we study them. So students are advised to study carefully the laws and the interpretations so that they can be in a better position to apply them to their languages. Thank you.